Namaskar. Welcome to this first session of the 14th Adhyaya of Shree Bhagavad Geeta. We start with the gratitude towards the Lord, with whose grace everything is possible. We pray to this Guru Shishya Parampara through which this knowledge has been preserved and transmitted for generations so as to reach us. I pay my respects to my Guruji, Pujya Guruma, with whose grace I am able to learn the scriptures and share this understanding with you. We start with a prayer. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So let us see what was said in the 13th Adhyaya by Bhagavan Shree Krishna. In the 13th Adhyaya, Bhagavan Shree Krishna talked about the Kshetra, Kshetragna, Viveka, how we can discriminate what is Kshetra, what is Kshetragna. In the first two shlokas, he said that Idam Shariram Kshetra and whatever, and Kshetragnam Chapi Mam Vidhi, you see me as a Kshetragna in all these Kshetra. And he also went on to explain to us the Prakruti and the Purusha Viveka, how the creation develops, and the Prakruti Purusha Viveka. Ultimately, he showed us the values of the life in the 7th to the 10th, 11th shlokas by Amanitvam, Adambitvam, and all the other values of life which are essential, which make us eligible to attain the Atma Gnana. And finally, in the later part of the 13th Adhyaya, Bhagavan has given us the Nirguna Atma Gnana. He showed us the Tattva by using contradictory words, described the Tattva, and finally showed us the Atma Gnan, the vision of the Gnani. How does the Gnani see Samam Pashyanti Brahma? Everything is the same for the Gnani. How he sees everything as oneness. There is no Raga Dvesha, there is no Bheda Bhava. And then what are the benefits of this knowledge, the phala of this Gnana, and everything that Bhagavan wanted to say about giving us this eternal knowledge about Jiva Brahma Aikya, about Tattvam Masi, has already been said in the 13th Adhyaya. And this is something that is not that Bhagavan has said for the first time, because even in the 2nd Adhyaya he gave us this understanding, and then he went on to describe all the other karma, sannyasa, and then the dhyana yoga, and then the Vishwarupa, Vibhuti yoga, and then finally the bhakti yoga, and then 13th Adhyaya gave us this knowledge, the eternal knowledge. Now, in the 14th Adhyaya, what Bhagavan is trying to tell us is more detailed description of the Tvam Pada, Vistara, the Jiva, because Jiva is the one who has all these three gunas. He is made up of the three gunas, and that is what makes up the Jiva. And for us to understand whatever God has said so far, jo Bhagavan ne abhi tak kaha hai humko, this understanding, how we can imbibe into us, and that is the crux of the further knowledge of the 14th Adhyaya, where Bhagavan does the Vistara of the Tvam-pada, how the gunas, the three gunas, how they determine our human behavior, how we are what we are because of these gunas. Why do we behave in a particular way, and how this changes over a period of time, and what do we need to do, where do we need to go, how can we imbibe more and more Sattva Guna in our life, because that is what Bhagavan is trying to tell us. And then finally, that is not the goal. Sattva Guna is not the goal. It is the most important part of the sadhana, no doubt, but it is not the final goal. The final goal, according to the Lord, is to transcend the three gunas, Nistray Gunyo Bhavarjuna. He has already said this in the 2nd Adhyaya, how we have to get beyond these three gunas. And in this Adhyaya, the 14th Adhyaya, he'll talk about this more, how we can go beyond this. First, he makes us explain the three gunas, and then he takes us to the journey beyond the three gunas, how we can develop this Gunatita Swarupa, that Jnana. And in the 15th Adhyaya, he does more detailed description of the Tat Pada Vistara, the Brahma Paramatma Pada Vistara, which is also called the Purushottama Yoga, the eternal Lord himself. He talks about his characteristics and attributes. So the 14th Adhyaya is called the Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga. And this essentially means, yoga means communion with the God, with the Lord, connecting with the Lord by Gunatraya Vibhaga, by the understanding of the distinction of all these three gunas, the three gunas which make the material nature, which make us the human beings, which makes all the species on this universe. And that is what we need to understand. So that is the crux of the understanding of the 14th Adhyaya. So in the 14th Adhyaya, what Bhagavan is going to do is going to detail description of the three gunas, how they work. The Sattva, Rajas and the Tamas are the three gunas which make us all the beings, all the jivas, and this is what determines all of us. And he talks about the creation, how the communion of the Prakruti and the Purusha develops into the creation, how this works. He gives a very beautiful example of a mother and a father, how the child is born, and from this example he shows how the creation develops by the communion of the Prakriti and the Purusha. And then Bhagavana talks about the three gunas, how the attachment to these three gunas is the cause for our bondage in our life, and what is the main problem and how we can overcome this problem. He first explains us how attachment occurs to these three gunas, the Sattva Guna, how the attachment occurs, Raja Guna, how the attachment occurs, and Tamas, how the attachment occurs, and then how it causes bondage. He describes each and every guna separately in different shlokas and shows us how each guna binds us in our day-to-day life. And when do we know which guna is working, whether Sattva is active, whether Raja or Tama is active, and how does this happen? How does they work in tandem with each other, the three gunas? That is what he describes. And finally he says, onward journey also depends on which guna is predominant at the time of our passing away, at the time of our death, at the time of the last part of our life. Whichever guna is active, we obtain that loka, and that is our the gati, the onward gati, or our onward journey of all the jivas is dependent on these three gunas. And finally gives the call to transcend these three gunas. That is a final call which we will see in the second session, the other session of the 14th Adhyaya, where in the later part of the 14th Adhyaya, from the 19th shloka, he talks about, Bhagavan Shree Krishna talks about the transcendence of the three gunas, how we can go beyond these three gunas, how we can understand our own Atma Swarupa, which is beyond these three gunas, three gunatita. And then Arjuna asks a question about gunatita, how we can know what is the vyavahar, vichar, behavior of the gunatita Purusha, how we can recognize such a person who has gone beyond this, transcended the three gunas and become Nistraigunya and Jnani. So let us start with the first shloka. The first shloka of the 14th Adhyaya starts with Bhagavana starts talking. There is no question that is asked by Arjuna here. Arjuna is still not in a mood to ask any question. He has already heard so much about Atma Jnana in the 13th Adhyaya. And in the 14th Adhyaya, Bhagavana continues with what he wants to say, that shows how much grace the Lord has on Arjuna, how much close he feels to Arjuna, because he wants to tell him a lot of things. Though he has already told him the eternal Atma Jnana, but still he wants to explain it again in more further details. And that is the repetition that Lord is doing sometimes. But this does not give rise to any blemish or any blame on him, because this is just as a grace on all of us, the Jiva, because this Atma Jnana is very, very sukshma. It's very subtle. The knowledge of the self, the knowledge of the Atman is so sukshma that for us it is very difficult to understand even by hearing it a few times. And that's why Lord tries to repeat this again and again so that we can understand what he's trying to tell us. And this is something which is very contrary to our samskaras, our impressions that have been with us for many, many years, many, many lifetimes. And that's why understanding this is not that easy. And that's why Bhagavana says in the first shloka, Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Param Bhuya Pravakshami Gnananam Gnanamuttamam Yajgnatva Munaya Sarve Param Siddhim buddhi mito gataha. So Bhagavan says, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Bhagavan Krishna says, Param bhuya pravakshyami. So he says, I am going to tell you again the same knowledge, Gnananam Gnanam Uttamam, the highest knowledge, which is the best knowledge. He says, Param, which is the highest knowledge. Bhuya. Bhuya means I am going to tell you again. Pravakshyami, I am going to tell you, I shall tell you again this highest knowledge. He again says that I have told you, but I still feel like telling you again because this is the highest knowledge. Highest knowledge because after knowing this, there is nothing more to be known. That is what Upanishads tell us, that this is the highest form of the knowledge. Yajnatva munaya sarve, by knowing which all the munis are the drashta of the mantra drashta munis, they have what they have attained. They have attained param siddhi ita gataha. They have attained the highest state. Param siddhi is that they have liberated themselves from all the sorrows, miseries, dukkha, and all this that is rooted in ignorance, that is gone by knowing this highest knowledge, because this gnana itself leads to agnana nivrutti, the agnana, ignorance, which is the root cause of all this bondage and all the problems, the asuri sampatti that we have and the way we live life, that is all gone by the understanding this. And Bhagavan says that I'm going to tell you again the same highest knowledge by which all the munis have attained this highest state. They become gnani. So the knowledge of the world that we seek, we for day in and out every day, is the knowledge of the world which is called apara vidya. And this knowledge could be information, it could be news, it could be the knowledge of the sciences, it could be the knowledge of all this biology, the human body, it could be any field of our profession, our hobbies, astronomy, astrophysics, it could be chemistry, it could be anything. So all this knowledge is called apara vidya. Whereas the knowledge of the Atman, our Upanishads tell us that this is called the Paravidya, and this Paravidya is the highest knowledge. And once we know this, there is nothing more to be known when we achieve this, or when we understand this Atman, the self, the soul, which pervades everything and is one. That understanding is what Lord Krishna is trying to tell us here. In the second shloka, Bhagavan Shri Krishna says, Idam gnanam upashritya mama sadharmya magataha sarge pinopajayante pralaye navyathanti cha. So here Lord Krishna is telling us what is that ultimate state that we obtain by this knowledge, by this self-knowledge. What is the benefit of this knowledge? He says, Idam gnanam upashritya, having taken the shelter of this knowledge, when we engross ourselves in the study of the scriptures, the Vedas, the Upanishads, and then when a learned guru makes us understand this Atma Gnana, and when we imbibe this Atma Gnana into our own life and imbibe this in our own life, in ourself, what happens? Bhagavan says, Mama sadharmyam agataha. They achieve me. Mama sadharmyam means they live with me, they become one with me, they achieve my eternal form, my nirguna swarupa. So they become one with the Lord. That is the benefit, the great benefit of being one with the Lord, understanding that my own self and the Lord, we are one and the same by our own, Atma Swarupa. There is no difference. And this Abheda Buddhi and this Gnana comes only with this understanding of this Atma Gnana. Sarge apina upajayante. And Bhagavan says that what is the benefit in this life when you live? What happens? He says, Sarge. Sarge means in this world, the Sarga, the Srushti. Apina upajayante. He did not take birth again in this world. So he develops, he attains his immortal Atma Swarupa. Bhagavan already has said in the second Adhyaya, na jayate, na mriyate, va kajachita. This soul does not get born, does not die. It is indestructible. It is abhyaya. It is, cannot be burnt or cannot be destroyed in any way. So that is the understanding. Once we understand this Atma Swarupa, there is no birth. We attain our immortal Atma Swarupa. And pralaye na vyathanti cha. And it does not become miserable. at the Pralaya Kala, at the end of the world, at Pralaya Kala, there is so much of destruction. Most of the people will be very worried, fearful, afraid about this destruction. And one who knows this chakra, the Gnana is there. One who knows that this is part of the existence, this is how existence is, and then he is not miserable at the Pralaya Kala, Yathanti. So there is no miseries, even the highest miseries of the Pralaya Kala, the pain, miseries, the fear, everything is gone with this Atma Gnana. That is the main advantage, the main benefit, the fruits or the Falashuddhi of this Atma Gnana. And this is what Bhagavan says, that it is the one which needs to be obtained. And that's why Bhagavan is telling Arjuna that I'm going to tell you again about this Atma Gnana with which you can attain this immortal own self and you become one with me. In the third shloka, Bhagavan says, Mama yonir mahat brahma tasmin garbham dadhamyaham sambhava sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharata. So in this shloka, Bhagavan talks about the creation, how the creation develops. He says it is the communion between the Purusha and the Prakruti. Purusha is the eternal Lord, the Self, the Nirguna Atma Tattva, the soul when we call it, or Prakruti. Prakruti is the nature which is made up of the three Gunatmika, the three Gunas. And when they come into communion, how the creation develops. Here Lord explains to us by a very beautiful, simple example of the birth of a child, how with the communion of a mother and the father, the child is born. With this example, Bhagavan Krishna explains to us how the creation develops by the communion of the Purusha and the Prakruti. It says, Mama Yoni Mahat Brahma. It says, my Prakruti is the cause, is the Karana, is the great womb through which all this birth of all the jivas, all the beings, everybody takes place. It is this great womb. And he says, uses the word here, Mama Yoni. Mama Yoni means this is my womb, or this is my Prakruti which becomes the womb for the birth of all the creation, says. And in the Vedanta Siddhanta also, it is said that Prakruti or Mother Nature or Maya is Ashrita to Brahma. So it is called Brahmashrita Maya, because the Brahma is the supreme soul, the supreme self, and Maya is the Shakti of the Lord which he uses to create this universe. And this Shakti of the Lord, this Maya Shakti, is under the control of the Lord or the Brahma. And that is how Bhagavan says, Mama Yoni, Mama Maya Duratyaya. In the 12th Adhyaya, he's already said this. So this Prakruti is the great womb. Mahat Brahma, Brahma word is also used here for Prakruti. Tasmin Garbham Dadhamyaham. It says, in this Prakruti, this great Mahat Brahma, this great womb, I plant the seed. Tasmin Garbham Dadhamyaham. I plant the seed of the creation in this Prakruti or the womb. And Sambhava Sarva Bhutanam Tata Bhavati Bharata. O Arjun, O Bharata, O the great in the Bharata dynasty, from this union, Sambhava Sarva Bhutanam Tata Bhavati, all the beings come into existence, they are all born. So the creation comes from this communion of the Purusha and the Prakruti. Bhagavan says, Mama Yoni Mahat Brahma becomes a great womb, and with this womb I plant the seed of the creation, and with this communion or the combination of the Prakruti and the Purusha, the entire existence, all the beings come into existence. The same thing Bhagavan is telling in the 4th shloka with a little different way. He says, Sarva Yonishu Kaunteya Murtaya Sambhavantiyaha Tasam Brahma Mahat Yonihi Araham Bija Prada Pita. Now here he says that nature is the universal mother, the Prakruti, for all the beings, for all the creation. And Bhagavan says, God and myself, I am the universal father of all the beings. He says, Hey Kaunteya, O Arjuna, son of Kunti, Sarva yonishu murtaya sambhavantiyaha. All the beings who are created from all the wombs. Sarva yonishu, all the beings. All the beings means all the species. 84 lakh species, not just human species, but all the animals, the reptiles, the plants, the birds, all the other species. Murti. Murti means the bodies that are created through this species. Sambhavantiyaha, all they are created from this Sarva yonishu, from all the wombs. Tasam Brahma Mahatyonihi, from those Tasam, from them, all this Prakruti is a great womb through which everything develops. He says, Aham Bija Prada Pitaha. I am the father who plants the seed in this great womb. And that's how he says that, the mother, the nature is the universal mother for all, and the God is the universal father. Our own parents in this life, they keep changing in every life. But our Shastras explain to us that Mother Nature and Father God are the same parents for all of us beings in all our lives. And that's how there is some responsibility of ours towards this universal Mother Nature and Father God. That is what Guruji explains to us, how we can fulfill this responsibility towards our Mother Nature and Father God. Now, our human body that we get is also a gift of the nature. And that's why to take an adequate care of this human body is very, very important, because this is the vehicle through which we perform all our activities, all our duties, all our karma, and we can not just do all our karma, artha, kama, but also the moksha purushartha, our shreya, our kalyana, our uddhara, our highest benefit also can be done through the same human body, which is the vehicle, which is the sadhana for our, for our life. And that's why to take good care of our human body is very, very important. The second is that we have been bestowed with this human body. We have been bestowed with some of the goal of the human body, and the human life, the goal of our life, according to our Shastra, is to know our real self. And that is what we should try and achieve in this human life, not just during our active work life, but we should devote some time to this pursuing of this higher goal of our human life during our lifetime. Balancing in our food, exercise, activities, relations, in our entire life, in all the spheres of our life, is also an important responsibility for us. Maintaining the balance of the universe, maintaining the climate, maintaining the environment, not disregarding or disrespecting the environment, not making it dirty, and do not changing the nature of the cycles is something that is our responsibility. We should also remain humble, sober approach and a helping approach towards all the beings as much as we can, because everybody in this universe, all the Mother Nature also does is to help all the beings so that they can survive. All the different species can survive in this Mother Nature, and that is what we should do as we are part of this nature. And Prakruti is endowed with these three gunas, the Sattva, the Rajas and the Tamas. And being humans, we are also part of this Prakruti. We are also part of these three gunas, the Sattva, Rajas and the Tamas. And the attachment to these gunas is the cause for bondage in life. That is what Lord Krishna is now going to tell us, how attachment to each of these gunas is the cause for our bondage. So he starts with first the Sattva Guna, and he describes what is Sattva Guna and then shows us how it binds us. Sattvam Rajastama iti Guna Prakruti Sambhavaha Nibadnanti Mahabaho Dehe Dehinamavyayam. So Bhagavan Shree Krishna says here that attachment to these three gunas is the cause for bondage. And how he says, "Ho Mahabaho, O Arjuna," it is the salutation to Arjuna, who is a great warrior. He has won many, many external battles. But now Bhagavan is trying to tell him that this is the great inner battle that you need to win. You need to understand what is this Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga. And only if you understand this, then you can get beyond this, only by understanding. Sattvam Raja Tama iti. Bhagavan says, Guna, Prakruti Sambhavaha Nibadnanti. So he says, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas are the three Gunas. Iti. Prakruti Sambhavaha. They arise from the Prakruti, from the mother nature, because they are part of the nature. When the Prakruti becomes the Maya, it is incorporated with these three Gunas. And this three Gunas then comes in the creation also, when the Prakruti becomes a creation and all the beings develop, and they also become part of this creation. And Nibadnanti, these are the three Gunas that bind the beings, all the beings, Bhagavan says, and these are the three Gunas which arise from Prakruti, and then they bind all the beings. And how, whom does it bind? He says, they bind the Dehe Dehinam Avyayam, the eternal soul that lives in this body. Dehe, it lives in the Deha, but is called the Dehi because it upholds the soul, the body, and that is the soul. Is talking of the soul, which is Avyayam, which is indestructible, which is Asanga. But even then, it binds this soul, and this is what Bhagavan Shree Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna. Okay, so let us now understand what Bhagavan is trying to tell us by saying that Guna Prakruti Sambhavaha Nibadnanti Dehinam. What is trying to tell us? Guna Prakruti Sambhavaha, these three Gunas are present in the Prakruti, the Maya, and because from the Prakruti and Maya, the humans or all the beings develop the Pancha Mahabhuta, and through this, all the beings develop, all the bhutas develop, and that's why these three Gunas also come in all the beings, all the species too. Nibadnanti Dehinam means it binds the Dehi. Dehi means the soul that upholds this body, and that is the Atma, and it binds the Atman. But according to the Vedanta, Atma itself is Asanga. It does not get bound ever. And that's why Shankaracharya ji in his Bhashya, he writes that Nibadnanti Iva. And he says we must understand that as if it binds. And this is an illusion that these three Gunas bind the Atma. It is a mithya, it is an illusion, it is a false knowledge. And that is the illusion that we need to clear. That is what Bhagavan is going to tell us, how we can get beyond this illusion, how we can transcend this Trigunatmika Maya. So Guna Sangha, and what is the binding is the identification to these three Gunas. That is the binding that binds. And this happens because of the misunderstanding of our self, of our real self. We believe that we are this body, mind, soul complex along with the Atman, along with the consciousness. But in reality, we are not this body, mind, or the intellect, but we are only the Atman. So this right understanding untwines this bondage, makes us realize the real Atma Swarupa, which cannot be bound by anything. And this untwines this bondage, releases us from this bondage. And finally, we can rise above these three Gunas, the Nistray Gunyoi Bhava Arjuna, to rise above the three Gunas. So in the 6th sloka, Bhagavan Shree Krishna says, Tatra Sattvam Nirmalatvat Prakashakamannamayam Sukha Sangena Badnati Jnana Sangena Chanagha. So Bhagavan is now explaining us what is Sattva Guna and how Sattva Guna binds. He says, O Anaga, O Arjuna. He describes Arjuna with different salutations in each of the shloka. Shows how close he feels with Arjuna, how is Sakha Bhava, Prema, how much is the love that he has for Arjuna to explain him. Anaga means one who is devoid of any sins. O Arjuna, you are Nishpapa, you are Anaga. And that's why he says, Tatra Sattvam Nirmalatvat. Sattva Guna is the pure Guna, Nirmala. And he is trying to tell Arjuna that you are also full of Sattva Guna, you are Anaga, you are devoid of sins. It is a Shuddha. Sattva is a Shuddha. And he says, Prakashakam Anamayam. Prakashakam means it illuminates. Illuminates does not mean that there is so much of light that it is causing kind of a glitter in our eyes. It is not that illumination. It illuminates means it illuminates knowledge. It is the Prakasha Swarupa. It is the Bhati, or it is the Bhana, or the Gnana Swarupa. That is what Sattva Guna is. And it is Anamayam. Anamayam, Amaya means disease. And Anamaya means one who is without any disease, one who is completely healthy, which is pure, healthy, absolutely. There is no sparsha of even some kind of impurity or disease in the Sattva Guna. And how does it bind? Bhagavan says, Sukha Sangena Badhanati. Sattva binds by happiness, by sukha. So Sattva Guna brings us sukha. We have a lot of happiness, we have comfort, we have joy, we like it, we enjoy it. And then once we start becoming comfortable in this happiness, this peace of mind, this quiet tranquility, this Sattva Guna, then it gives us the desire of having it again and again. And that's how the Sattva Guna binds also. It is not that Sattva Guna does not bind. So Sattva is the best out of all the three gunas for us, but it binds. And this is what we need to understand, that it is by the desire of this happiness it binds. And the second way that Sattva Guna binds is Jnana Sangena Cha. Bhagavan says it also binds by knowledge. How does knowledge bind to us? We may ask, but it's very clear. The more and more knowledge we obtain, the more and more we become educated, the more and more we have knowledge, we also have a pride of our knowledge. We also know that I know something. That is a pride that we have. And this pride is the one that binds us to this knowledge. And it has been seen in years and generations that people who are the most knowledgeable, say for example in the earlier Vedic times, the Brahmana Koti who had the knowledge people, and then the educated people, all the elite people in the, the doctors and all the other highly educated people, professionals, they have the most pride, they have the most arrogance in their dealings with people. And this is quite well known. If we keep our eyes open in this world, we will know that knowledge is the one that binds us like anything. And this is a very, very difficult to understand and then to get untwined from. So knowledge, Sattva Guna binds by happiness and by the desire of having happiness and by the pride of knowledge. So that is how Sattva Guna binds us. In the second shloka, 7th shloka, Bhagavan Shree Krishna talks about the Rajo Guna, what it is and how it binds. He says, Rajo Ragatmakam Vidhi Trushna Sanga Samudbhavam Tannibadnati Kaunteya Karma Sangena Dehinam. So it describes what is Rajaguna and how Rajas binds us. He says, O Kaunteya, O Arjuna, son of Kunti, Raja Ragatmakam Vidhi. He says, know that the Rajas causes Raga. Raga means attachments. It causes a lot of desires. It colors our vision in the way Ragatmakam Vidhi. Know that it colors our vision, does not allow you to see the reality. It always wants you to achieve more and more. Ye dil mange more, hamesha. And how does it bind? He says, Trushna Sanga Samudbhavam. It arises, this attachment arises by the attachment to Trushna. Sanga to the Trushna. And Sanga means attachment and Trushna means desires. So we have a lot of desires. We want to achieve this. We want to achieve this. We are ambitious. We want to do a lot of things. We want to have so many, education. We want to have so much of comfort. So we want to have so much of possessions. A lot of desires we have, name, fame, money, wealth, everything. And all these arises from the Raja Guna, the Rajas Guna. And how does it bind us? It says, Karma Sangena Dehinam Tat Nibadnanti. Karma Sanga, it binds by the attachment, Sanga, to actions, karma. And because we have desires, the desires spring us into action. And these actions are nothing but our karmas that we do every day. Some of the projects, some of the things that we keep on doing. We have lots of things to do. A to-do list is always there right from the time we wake up, because we have lots of desires which are still unfulfilled. Every day we finish things, but then for the next day also there are a lot of pending things. And that's how this is the binding force of the Raja Guna. And these are the people who are more into Rajas, the people who are more ambitious, outgoing, more type A personality, more achievers, more aspirational. And this is how the Raja binds by the attachment, the Sangha, to our karma, to our actions, because it leads to more and more desires. The more the desires you fulfill, the more the desires spring up into us, and that is how it keeps on going. And Tamas Tvajnanajam Vidhi Mohanam Sarvadehinam Pramadalasya Nidrabhihi Stannibadnati Bharata. So what is Tamas and how Tamas Guna binds? He says, O Bharata, O Arjuna, you are the greatest in the Bharat dynasty. Tamah tu ajnanajam viddhi. Know that tamasa arises from ajnana, ignorance of our own self, our own Atma Swarupa. It says mohanam sarva dehinam, and it deludes all the people. They make the people into moha. Sarva dehinam, all the people, all those dehis they are deluded, and this moha does not give us the correct vision. Whatever we see is not the right vision, it is a colored vision. We don't see the right thing. Whatever we see is not the correct thing, and this moha is very, very common. Every day we know in our shastras, in our scriptures, it is very well described in different characters. The highest description is Dhritarashtra, how his mind was deluded because of moha for his sons, and that's why he did not give even an inch of land to the Panduputra, Pandavas, because of which there was this Karma Kshetra, Kurukshetra, the Dharma Yuddha had to be fought. And this is how moha deludes our vision, does not allow us to see what is the reality. And how does it do this? He says, Pramad alasya nidrabihi. So Pramada means negligence. What is our duty? We don't do it correctly. What we need to do, we don't do it right. We get, become busy in doing something else, but we forget our goal. And this is by negligence. And this is what is called as a pramada. Alasya means laziness. We are lazy. Most of us, we don't want to wake up right from the morning. And then for finishing the different tasks, we always feel that, okay, we'll do it tomorrow. Instead of today, we'll do it tomorrow or maybe day after. So that is a postponement attitude. And that is the laziness. And nidrabihi. Nidrabihi means excess sleep over and above what is necessary for our rest. Normally for our rest, about 6, 7 or at the most 8 hours of sleep is necessary for most of us, depending on our sleep cycles. But if you have an excess sleep more than this, then definitely this is a tamo guna. This is the cause of the tamo guna. So tamas is how it works. It arises from ignorance, deludes everyone by moha, colors the vision, and it inspires us into negligence, laziness and excessive sleep. Tat nibadhanati, and that is how it binds people. Sattvam sukhe sanjayati raja karmani bharata jnanam avrutya tu tamaha pramade sanjayatyuta. So Bhagavan again summarizes how each guna binds us. He says Sattvam sukhe sanjayati. Sattva Guna joins us into happiness, desires, joys, and desire for this happiness and joy to be everlasting. That's how it binds us. Raja karmani bharata. Rajas Guna inspires us into desires, actions, karma, and this is how Bharata, it binds us. And Jnanam avritya tu tamaha. While tamas hides the knowledge, pramade sanjayati uta, it inspires us into negligence or carelessness. We need to know that we don't do whatever is the right thing, what is our goal. Instead, we get into different things, doing different things. That is the pramada, and that is the maybe alasya and nidra and pramada. Everything is because of the tamaguna. And now in the next shloka, Bhagavan is explaining when do we know which guna is working, how it works, how the three gunas work in tandem with each other. Rajas tamas cha vibhuyaha sattvam bhavati bharata raja sattvam tamaschaiva tamah sattvam rajastatha. So Bhagavan says raja tamah cha abhibhuyaha sattvam bhavati bharata. So O Arjuna, he says, O Bharata, O Arjuna, Sattva will work by suppressing the Raja and the Tama guna. So Raja, Tama, cha Abhibhuya. Abhibhuya means they are suppressed. And that is how Sattvam Bhavati. Sattvam guna works, or it expresses itself. And when it expresses, it suppresses the Raja and the Tama guna. Similarly, he says, Raja Sattvam Tama cha Eva. And Rajas will work by suppressing the Sattvam and the Tama guna. It will be Abhibhuya, it will be suppressed. And that is how Rajas Guna will work. It becomes more preponderant while it suppresses the Tamas and the Sattva Guna. And similarly, Tama, Sattvam Rajas Tatha means Tamas will work by suppressing the Sattva and the Rajas Guna. So this is how all the three gunas work. Bhagavan is trying to explain us that there are different proportions of these three gunas in each one of us. Say for example, Sattva Guna, if it is predominant in somebody, say it is 60% of Sattva Guna, 20% is Raja Guna and 20% is Tama Guna, then Sattva will be the predominant. It will suppress the Raja and the Tama because they are in much less proportion, and that is how Sattva expresses more and more in that personality. Similarly, if the Sattva Guna is say 40%, but 30% is Raja and 30% is Tama, then the combination of Tama and Raja will become 60% and will not allow the Sattva Guna to be predominant or dominate on the Raja and the Tama Guna. So that is how the balance of these three gunas work, and that is what expresses us in our personality. Sarvadvareshu dehesmin prakasha upajayate Gnanam yada tada vidyat vivruddham sattva midyuta. So how do I know that Sattva Guna is currently working? Bhagavan tells us, Yada sarvadvareshu dehesmin. When all the five senses in the body, we know that we have five Gnanendriyas through which operate through the five holes that we have in our body, the Chidras or the Dwara, that is called the Shrotrendriya, the Sparshendriya, the Twagendriya, the Chakshudendriya, the Granendriya. So all these, they collect all the knowledge from the outside world. When this Gnanendriyas, all the five Sarvadwara Gnanendriyas are involved in Prakasham, Gnanam, Upajayate, when they are involved in attaining the knowledge, in illuminating the knowledge. And this knowledge can only come when the mind is calm. Only then. And this is the work of the Sattva Guna. Then Bhagavan says, Tada Vidyat Vivruddham Sattvam Ityuta. Sattva Guna is on the rise. So whenever we want to know something, Sattvika, we want to understand, we want to know knowledge, we want to understand, and all this, whenever the mind is calm, this means that Sattva is active, because Sattva Guna is the one that is the most important for obtaining knowledge, the right understanding, and that is what is the work of Sattva Guna. Sattvat sanjayate gnanam, Bhagavan is going to tell in the next shlokas, in the further shlokas, in the 18th shloka is going to tell Sattvat sanjayate gnanam. Lobha pravuttirarambha. Bhagavan says in the 12th shloka, Lobha pravuttirarambha karmanamashama spruha rajasyetani jayante vivruddhe bharatarshabha. So how do I know that Raja Guna is currently working? Bhagavan says, Oh Bharatarshabha, O Arjuna, the greatest in Bharata dynasty, Rajasi vivruddhe etani jayante. He says, know that the Rajas Guna is on the rise. When? He says, Lobha pravrittihi karmanam arambha. Means that lobha, greed, pravritti, all our actions, karma, all our actions, whenever they begin, because Raja Guna inspires us into actions. And that's how whenever there is action and we achieve something, then we have a greed that we want something more than this. We want to have this again and again. We want that person, that vyakti, that thing, that possession, that wealth should remain with me all the time. It should keep growing. And all these greed, these possessions, these actions, all this is, whenever this happens, we must know that Rajas is on the rise. Ashamaha, when the mind is not steady, because these desires don't keep our mind steady. Bhagavan already has said that only the Gnana phase, the mind is steady, but when there are desires of all these objects, of possessions, all the wealth or objects of this world in our mind, the mind is never going to remain steady. And spruha, he says there are intense desires, one after the other. The desires keep springing like an unending well. It just keeps coming. One desire comes, when we try to fulfill, there is another desire, we try to fulfill, and this is what happens to us in our lifetime. And this is the work, this is the job of the Raja Guna, and we should know that Raja Guna is active whenever we have all these desires springing in our mind. Aprakasho pravrittischa pramado moha evacha tamasyetani jayante vivruddhe kuru nandana. So how do I know that Tamas Guna is currently working? Bhagavan says, O Kuru Nandana, O Arjuna, who is the giver of joy to the Kuru dynasty, he says, Tamasi vivruddhe etani jayante. Know that Tamasi is on the rise when aprakasha, apravrittischa. He says aprakasha means that the mind is clouded, there is no steady mind, there is no gnana, but it's all apravrutti, it's all laziness. Don't feel like doing anything, I feel lazy, don't want to do my job. And this is clouding of the mind, too many desires, laziness of the mind. All this is because the work of the Tamas Guna, aprakasha. There is no inclination to obtain knowledge. We feel like just lazing around. Pramada moha evacha. And when there is pramada means dereliction from our duty. What we need to do, we don't do it. We get to do something else. We get into doing something else. And moha, undue attachment, what hampers our discrimination, aviveka. विवेक नहीं रहता है, मोह जब होता है तो it dilutes the mind, it does not allow us to see the reality, and it hampers our real discriminative intellect, and it is all because of this attachment, this delusion, which is called moha. So this is the job of the tamas guna. Whenever this happens, pramada, moha, apravrutti, laziness, aprakasha, Bhagavan says that know that tamas guna is on the rise. Whenever this happens in any part of your life or any time of your day, know that Tamas Guna is on the rise at this point of time. So Bhagavan has told us about the three gunas, the Sattva, the Rajas, the Tamas. The entire world works on these three gunas, and these three gunas control all the behavior of all the beings, our own, especially the human beings. Because as humans, we have the free will of doing what we want to do. The other animals are more, they are inspired by their natural instincts. These three gunas inspire the human beings into action, and we are all pravrutta. We are all inspired into action because of these three gunas and the preponderance of the gunas in each one of us that inspires us into particular action. And gunas are the ones which make or break people. With the more predominant Sattva Guna, it can create a very beautiful, harmonious personality. But with the predominance of Tamo Guna or Rajo Guna, it can actually break the people because it can create a lot of miseries and discomfort in their life. And these three gunas, they are in the Karana Prakruti, and that's why they come in the Jiva. Jiva is the Karya of the Prakruti, as from the Prakruti the Jivas develop, and that's why these three gunas come. And this human body and mind are formed by our three gunas, and we are all governed by these three gunas. And Bhagavan has already told us previously in the 4th Adhyaya that gunas are the cause for all the actions. Guna guneshu vartante, meaning that one gunas affect the guna, and all this karma, vyavahara, and all these relationships, all the work, everything happens within the two gunas. And this is a saguna, the body or the anatma level, whereas our own atma swarupa, our atma is nirguna. It does not get affected by these gunas, and that is what Bhagavan is going to tell us. And now he is going to tell us that even the onward journey after death is due to these gunas at the time of the death, one which is predominant. So in the 14th shloka he says, Yada sattve pravrutte tu pralayam yati deha bruta tadottama vidam lokan amalan pratipadhyate. So it talks about the onward journey. When the Sattva is predominant, at the last part of our life, if Sattva Guna is predominant, what happens to our onward journey? Bhagavan says, Yada Sattve Pravruddhetu. Even Sattva is on the rise at the end time. Pralayam Yati Deha Pruta. When the person dies, or when the person is at the end point of his life, if the Sattva Guna is predominant, then he says, Tada Uttama Vidam Lokan. Then he attains the higher lokas, the Swarga Loka, Brahma Loka, and the Shiva Loka, and all these higher lokas, the Deva Loka. This is what is our gati or our onward journey. Amalan pratipadyate, where there is no impurity. Mala means ashuddhi. Amala means absolute shuddhi, when there is no impurities. It is completely shuddha. These higher lokas are very, very pure, shuddha, and that is where this person goes. Rajasi pralayam gatva karma sangishu jayate tatha praleenastamasi mudhayonishu jayate. So Bhagavan says at the end of the life, pralayam gatva, if Rajas is on the rise, then karma sangishu jayate, then he will be born in the same world amongst people who have attachment to actions. So that is the madhya gati. It is not the udva gati, it is the madhya gati in this loka, in this manusya loka. that persons who have with a lot of attachments to people, they are born there. Tatha pralinas tamasi. While if tamas is on the rise, when pralina, for pralaya kala, mudayo nishu jayate, will attain, this person will attain the animal species, adogati, will go from the human birth to the animal species in the next birth, and that is the lower adogati. That is what the tamas guna does if it is on the rise at the end of our life. So in essence, Bhagavan is trying to tell us that these are the three gunas, and our endeavor should be to go from tamasa gun to rajasa gun, and from rajasa gun to sattva gun. And this is the first teaching of Bhagavan Shri Krishna, that we should make our life as sattvic as possible. As far as possible, we should try to utilize our time, energies to incorporate, to inculcate, to live in the sattva guna. And if tamasa, if it is predominant, how do we come to know? If rajasa is predominant, he has already told us. And only if we attempt this all throughout our life, then only sattva will be predominant at the time of death. Otherwise, Guruji explains to us that there is no way that sattva can just become predominant at the end of the life, because at the end of the life there is so much of pain, miseries, and at that time to remain in the sattva guna, to remain in that calm peace of mind, to remember the Lord, that requires the the sadhana for the entire life. And this is the main practice of the spiritual journey. We may be doing karma, upasana, bhakti, any of the practices, but the main purpose is to make our life more sattvic, sattvic thoughts, sattvic actions, sattvic behavior towards others around us, sattvic food that we should try and incorporate, sattvic reading, adhyatmic reading, nama smarana, bhakti, devotion, sadguna sampatti, and satsanga, above all, Swadhyaya of Geeta ji, scriptures. All this will help us to make our life sattvika. And the final teaching of the Lord is not just that we need to make our life sattvika, that is the first and the important goal of the spiritual journey, but the final goal and the final teaching of the Lord is that we should transcend these three gunas to understand our eternal Atma Swarupa, our own self, which is nirguna, which is beyond these three gunas. And that is what Bhagavan is going to tell us in the next session of the 14th Adhyaya. So coming to the end of this 14th Adhyaya, the Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga, which is the communion with the Lord by understanding the distinction of the three gunas. Bhagavan has already told us about the Sattva, Rajas and the Tamas, how the creation develops because of the communion between the Purusha and the Prakruti. Bhagavan says that he is a universal mother, Prakruti is the universal mother, Bhagavan is the universal father. How with this communion, he is the Bija Prada, Pitaha, and Mahat Mama Yoni, Mahat Brahma, he says. And this attachment to the three gunas, how they cause the bondage, is already very well described. Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, all the three gunas bind us in different ways. Sattva by knowledge, by happiness, Raja by our desires for our actions, and Tama by our ignorance, our moha, pramada, alasya. This is how they cause bondage. He described each and every guna to understand, to make us understand how it binds differently and which guna is working when he says sattva. How do we know that sattva is working, and how these gunas work in combination with each other, how they suppress each other, and how our personality happens. And he described that onward journey is also dependent on these three gunas, which is important. And then in the next session, Bhagavan Shri Krishna is going to talk to us about transcending these three gunas. What is that gunatita person, and what are the lakshana, what are the attributes of this gunatita person? How is his behavior? How does he work? How does he think? What is his vision? What is his vyavahara? All these Bhagavan is going to talk to us about in the final session, the next session of the 14th Adhyaya. With this, we come to the end of the first session of the 14th Adhyaya. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parah Brahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.